Well, thank you very much, everybody. It is very, very exciting to be here. And I have to say, I have been very much a nature nut since a very young age. I guess I started when I was about 12 years old. That's when I got my first pair of binoculars, and that's when I discovered birds. Unfortunately, in high school, some of the guys in my class discovered I was a bird watcher, and so I had to suffer through all of my high school years with the nickname Birdman. But little did I know back then that desire to be out there in the woods or down by the ocean or in the creeks or around the kooks, I suppose. Little did I know that I would be get so involved that it would lead to the life that I've had so far. It's been quite a ride, and I want to tell you about one specific story. And the story has something in common, I think, with most of the other speakers and the entertainers this morning and this afternoon, and that has to do with passion. And it's finding your passion. If you're going to build a legacy, the way to do it is to find out what makes you tick. And how you do that, I don't know. And some people might think it's luck, and perhaps some of it is. But I think a lot of it has to do with just being out there and experimenting and trying and searching and not giving up until you find whatever it is that motivates you. I was fortunate enough to become a birdman at a young age, and that took me to different places all over the world. When I finally landed that job years ago at the zoo, I started a travel program, and that enabled me to feed my need to go and see the world and to see the wilds of the world. And it ended up taking me to Africa, which has been my home away from home for the last 30 years. I've done trip after trip to different countries. I've fallen in love with the African people, with the landscape, and of course with the wildlife. When you go to Africa, in some of those places, it's like Christmas morning for a child. You just never know what you're going to expect, but you know it's going to be good. And so these series of experiences that I had in Africa suddenly opened up a door to do some volunteer work in West Africa. And my wife and I felt that it was time that we give back a little bit to this amazing continent and to the people. So I took a volunteer position for a couple of months, and I was working with the Zoological Society there, trying to make it an educational institute to turn the cranks of young kids about the importance of intact ecosystems and wildlife. And when I was working in that position for the 2 months that I was there, I met all of the movers and shakers in the region in the environmental world. I came back to Calgary. A year passed. I got a phone call from a friend of mine that I had met there, and we had struck it off. This is a guy who was working in the outback of Africa. He was on a motorcycle, a 250cc motorcycle. He lived with different villages, motorcycling between the villages, to find out what made them come up with the rules that allowed them to survive in an environment without destroying the environment as they were living off that environment. And he was trying to figure out why they were so successful. And in doing that, he learned a lot. He developed trust in the local communities. When the local communities were confronted with the issue that the federal government of Ghana wanted to take their land away so they could make it into a national park to protect some hippos there, the local people, the chiefs there, realized that if they gave their land to the national parks, they would lose the ability to control what happened to that land. So they went back to the national parks and said, if we created a park and met your needs to protect that population of hippos, would we be able to do that? So they did, and they called upon my friend, who they had developed a trust with, to ask him if he knew of anybody that could help build this park. He phoned me at the Calgary Zoo. Through our conservation fund, we started to fund this project to develop a park to protect a small population of hippos. Now, hippos in East Africa and Southern Africa are fairly common, although their numbers are going down. In West Africa, in Ghana specifically, there's only two populations of hippos, one that's protected by a national park and the other one that is now protected by this small community park. So we started on a project. We actually hired an individual that was a graduate, a former student of mine from the UFC, Donna Shepard. She's the one that really wins the award for pulling off this project of passion. She started organizing the development of this park. To make a long story short, I was there 2 years ago for the 10-year anniversary of the park. About 4 years ago, the park opened up a bank account for the first time. It started off with 10 staff over 10 years ago when we started to work on this project that we paid for through money that we raised here in Calgary. Now the park supports about 50 people. And it's the concept of spin-off has spread throughout the community. Before, the hippos that lived in the water there were considered to be a bit of a problem because they'd come out at night and eat grass. Unfortunately, corn is a type of grass. And so the corn would sometimes be invaded by the hippos, and a family group could lose an entire crop in one night by a couple of hippos that marauding their cornfield. So now they've developed a new attitude towards the hippos, that the hippos were sent to them by the river gods to establish a degree of economic prosperity. That's what the park has done. It's created a whole different situation. Well, then somewhere along the line, we got a new zoo director. And that zoo director didn't understand why I was putting so much energy and money into the development of this project in West Africa. And so I told the chiefs of my problem, that I had this lion that I had to tame. And they said, well, let me think about this for a while. And then they came back to me a couple days later and they said, we have come up with a solution to your problem, Mr. Bryan. We are going to take a big man and make him bigger. In other words, they were going to take our zoo director of the time, it's not the one that's there now, but they were going to take that zoo director and they were going to make him into a bigger man. In other words, they were going to make him into a chief. And I said, but that sounds like a great idea, because if you elevate an individual to a higher podium, that person will have to perform to those degrees that you've now elevated them to. So talk about smart political thinking. So, but then they said, but Mr. Bryan, we're going to make you into a chief too. And I said, no, you can't make me into a chief. And they says, oh, yes, we must, because it is because of you that we have managed to come this far. And I said, no, we've got to make it for the individual that we need to put on that pedestal. And they said, oh, no, Mr. Bryan, we will make you into a chief too, but you will be a smaller chief. So what they did, after they, of course, made the bigger chief into a chief, then they made me into a chief. So I'm going to show you what happened here. I'm going to remember this whole operation took a whole day. There was goats and sheep running in the foreground. There was chickens here and there. This was the second robe that they put on me, and this was the hottest day of my life. I was sweating buckets. They put on boots. I won't bother putting these on. Notice the polished back. That's a polished white leather, because these are chief's riding boots. And of course, you don't want to have the handmade hard work of that beautiful needlework rubbed off on the side of the horse. So they put on the chief's boots. Of course, they gave me a hat. And then they gave me a pair of pants. And I'm not going to put them on because it takes me a while to wrestle into them. But I will show you that the good thing about these pants is that one size fits all. And I said to my wife, honey, this is great. Now we can get into each other's pants at the same time. Nevertheless, the whole project took on its own legs. It wasn't just developing a park and attracting tourists into that park that made the money for the park, but it was also the relationships that we developed with other people that liked the idea. So it was one idea that wasn't really our idea at all. It was the chief's ideas. So it wasn't foreigners coming in and telling them what to do. It was the chiefs asking for help. And we went in and guided the process, but they made all the decisions. And if I could have the video, please, I'm going to take you to this place that is called the Wichau Hippo Sanctuary. And the model that we've created from this hippo sanctuary, whenever you're ready, I'm all set. The model that we created from this hippo sanctuary is a model that we've been trying to replicate in other parts of Africa. In fact, the chiefs, who should be on the video right now, there we go. The chiefs, they have been traveling to other parts of Africa and talking about this very process. Now, if I could have the sound, please. Hippos are called a keystone animal. If I could have the sound up just a touch more, that'd be great. They're called a keystone animal. They are out there at night cutting the grass. But what do? They come back to the water. What do hippos do in the water? They poop in the water. And that inoculation of organic material feeds the insects, feeds the invertebrates, feeds the fish, feeds the people. So hippos are a very important part of the whole process. If I could have the sound up even a bit more, that would be great. And this hippo, look at, they may be big, clumsy-looking animals. They're like a Spalumbo sausage with a suitcase for a mouth. But they move that incredible bulk with incredible ability, and they are one of the most important animals in a water environment in this part of the world. Well, this is the lodge that Calgary Zoo Money built in those early days, and it is a place where you too could stay for about $7 a night if you wanted to go there. It's way off the beaten track. Obviously, this place is a place where certain types of tourists go. You must hang your underwear high, or that goat will eat it. Trust me, I know. And here's where you can eat, and it's in a screened-off area. Some of the local ladies from the local villages have been taught how to cook food that is palatable to the tourist's tongue. The good news here is that it's only about 50% tourists from outside the country that come here. The rest are local tourists. The local people that live there are called the Lobi people, and they live in these mud huts that look like they're right out of a Dr. Seuss book. It looks like they've been squeezed out of a big toothpaste tube of mud. So as the family group grows bigger, the house grows bigger. And it's not just one family that lives there. It's aunts, uncles, brothers, cousins, all living together. They store their food in that container right there. They are a subsistence farming community. But of course, just like any society, it's the kids that are going to be inheriting the future. They are the ones that will be charged with looking after the park. There's been another volunteer group that has organized a scholarship fund to take the bright lights of the community, the kids that are chosen by the teachers themselves, to go off onto university and college to learn how to run the park. And here's why we were so interested in this area. Riparian areas around the world are in trouble. They are areas that are diminishing in quality and size. And it's in Africa, where the hippo lives, that makes these riparian areas so important. The forest edge is home to monkeys and various species of birds. Of course, the water itself is an important habitat for a variety of things, including the hippos. But it's the people in the area that had to be bought into the whole process. And hopefully you can turn up the sound for this next little bit here. Very strange to think of a zoo drilling water holes and building schools, but we know that if conservation is going to work, we have to pay attention to the people that live in the area. And that's the bottom line. We had to establish an understanding and a trust with the local people. The easiest way to do that was to put in water wells. It was funny because that water well had a sign on it saying sponsored by the Rotary Club South. I showed this video to some kinsmen once, and they were virtually throwing money at me. So if you want to try to raise money, just show the competing organization. And of course, clean water in this part of the world is something that is just not easily accessed. So it was very simple. We ended up putting in 7 water wells, establishing enough water sources for all of the 15 or 16 villages in the region. Then my brother and his company happened to be a green energy supplier, so his family came over to open up the beginning of a solar power, and I told my niece, by the way, that she had to eat everything. And this was the beginning of the solar program, where we established 550 solar lighting units, because in this part of the world they use kerosene to light the lanterns. And kerosene is a pollutant. It burns babies. If it's spilled when it's on fire, it's expensive. So getting the sun, harvesting the sun's energy in solar panels, which virtually last forever, LED lights, which virtually last forever, and the only weak point were the batteries, but the batteries were sourced locally, so that they didn't have to go to an international source to replace the batteries when they eventually run out. They were heavily subsidized units, but the 550 units, that meant there was 1 each for the 550 mud homes in the region. And the stories we've been getting back have been fantastic, of kids sleeping or staying up late at night and falling asleep by the lights, reading their school readers. And the school marks have increased as well. And actually that brings me to the next point. Somebody much smarter than me asked a little girl, "Where do you go to school?" And the little girl said, "I don't go to school, madame, because I have no school to go to." And so we decided we had to build a school. Well, since we've built 2. And the first school, our studies indicated about 60 kids were going to appear on day 1. On day 1, 203 showed up. So the need was incredible. We swung a deal with the Ghanaian government so that they would hire the teachers. We built the infrastructure. This is the opening of the second school that we just opened up about 2 years ago. And believe me, it was a huge community extravaganza. The dancing, the drumming, the speeches. It was very, very exciting. And then finally the unveiling of the school plaque, and the dancing continued. I think I went to bed at about 10 o'clock at night, and I heard the dancing continued until sunrise the following day. So it was a very, very big time, very exciting time. And the school has since, the second one, like I said, was opened up in another part of the Wichau area that is a very remote location. We not only built a school, but we built a teacher's house because we found out that the teachers are more likely to leave after a short period of time because of inadequate housing. So we built each of the two schools homes for the teachers. And then, of course, you can't have just a schoolhouse built as a schoolhouse. You've got to, of course, put in some books. So we started off their library with some nice books, and then school can't be all study. It's got to be a little bit of play, as any good university student knows. And so we made up some outfits for the boys, soccer outfits. We had them sewn locally to keep the money there, but we used Calgary Zoo colors. And then for the girls, we had volleyball nets given, and of course uniforms sewn for the girls. The same idea, locally sewn to keep the money locally there, and colors, the Calgary Zoo colors. And there's our chiefs there, and of course a big party afterwards. And then finally, at the end of the day, they put on quite a song and dance for us as we challenged them to a game of soccer, which we lost in an unbelievable heat wave. But that's the story, and the whole idea behind it is that we can replicate the model that was created at Wichau, and that's what we hope to be our legacy years down the road. Thank you very much.